Paul, but if you want to call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Eric. With that, we will start our meeting. So a virtual meeting of the Transportation Policy Committee is called to order. And Melissa, will you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartke and members of the TPC. When I call your name, please indicate if you're present for the record. Don't forget to unmute before responding. Rock Arnett.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Barney.
Yes, I am here also. Thank you.
Thank you. David Barry. Councilmember Binsbacher.
Present.
Thank you. Jen Daniels.
Here.
Thank you. Doug DeCluson. Councilmember Durham. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
I'm here.
Thank you. Charles Humantle.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Lord.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Price. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers. Mayor Wires.
You're gonna hit here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss. Mayor Woods. And our chair is present. Is there anyone that I missed?
Doug DeClusen's here.
Thank you, Doug. A quorum is present.
Thank you, Melissa. So just as a reminder, please remember to mute your speakers or when you are not talking, unmute before speaking, and again, mute afterwards. So item number 2 on our agenda is a call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are not on the agenda for discussion and not action. So MAG staff, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair Hartke, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. We received several public comments. I'll read them now.
Thank you.
The first comment is from Jack Harper. Begin comment. The azmag plan for the 20-year transportation tax renewal / expansion is horrible. You're completely suffocating the rural areas in favor of light rail for downtown Phoenix, Glendale, and Tempe. End comment. The next comment is from Jeannie Ida-Aki. Begin comment. Hello, as the team looks at improving transportation around the valley, I know that safety and ease of use is paramount. In addition, I would like to add that our environment desperately needs less emissions. Please think forward and use sun power electricity whenever possible. Also, vastly expand the rail system to accommodate riders from all over the valley. As you know, our commutes are horrendous and dangerous. Just changing lanes can be life-threatening. But if we can provide more trains / subways, these will help both the environment and safety. End comment. The next comment comes from Martina Pickett, a resident of Buckeye. Begin comment. Please fix Jack Rabbit and I-10, make it just like Perryville. End comment. The next comment is from Kevin Thompson, a resident of Mesa. Begin comment. As my client and I reviewed the TPS agenda item 5, MAG Freeway Noise Analysis Study Update Technical Memorandum number 2, and we're eager to see the sites that would be identified for study. What we are seeing is about what we expected, which is a study that is comparing apples to oranges. I say this because the study is comparing aged AR-ACFC to newly ground pavement. The newest AR-ACFC pavement in the study is still 5 years old. The ADOT Arizona Quiet Pavement Pilot Project comprehensive report that was published in 2018 and that I have shared with most of this committee tells us that the noise levels increase with the age of the pavement, regardless of the surface treatments tested, AR, ACFC, diamond grind, or tinning. Brand new diamond ground pavement is always going to outperform 5-year-old pavement, especially pavement that has never been maintained, which is why the test is an apples to oranges test. If you truly want an apples to apples comparison, then either a formula that normalizes the age and lack of maintenance of the study sites will have to be developed, or ADOT will need to install AR/ACFC on one of the freeways they are milling and grinding and allow testing to be accomplished that will then compare a newly ground section of freeway to a newly paved section of the freeway. But we believe if this is accomplished, the results will mirror ADOT's AQ-PPP comprehensive report and find that AR/ACFC consistently outperforms diamond grinding as a surface treatment. End comment. The next comment is from Larry Schofield, a resident of the East Valley. Begin comment. My name is Larry Schofield. I have lived in the East Valley for the past 57 years, and I currently work in the concrete industry. I wanted to make the policy committee aware that in 2020, there were 323 heat-related deaths in Maricopa County. This is equivalent to 75% of the traffic fatalities in 2019, yet this receives no attention by the policy committee or MAG. While MAG promotes maintaining a black freeway system, which covers approximately 8,000 acres, heat-related deaths have increased from 49 in 2003, when MAG first started covering the concrete with asphalt rubber, to 323 today, over a six-fold increase. Using ADOT's state-adjusted crash cost per fatality, this is equivalent to over $9 million of economic loss to Maricopa County for 2020 alone, yet it receives no attention in MAG's freeway planning process. As I mentioned in my last comments to the committee, Arizona taxpayers expended several $1 million previously funding the almost 15-year-long Arizona Quiet Pavement program, whose report was only published in 2018. Yet MAG funds the Volpe Group to conduct a similar yet very limited study when much more extensive information is already available in the Quiet Pavement Program report. For example, Volpe will be conducting 1 hour-long measurements at 4 locations to determine effective flow reflectivity, a fancy term to determine the absorptive characteristics of the two pavements. However, this was studied by Volpe at 4 of the research grade locations for 5 years on asphalt rubber pavements, ranging in age between 1 and 12 years. Duplication of this work with the paucity of data, which will be collected in the current study, is not good value for the taxpayers. Asphalt rubber was not found to be absorptive, and clearly concrete is not. Both the Wayside and OBSI measurement locations also represent a single snapshot in time, as contrasted to 15 years of continuous data collection by the previous research, and yet the results do not even make the Volpe report or awareness by MAG. Volpe's approach also appears questionable, since it appears the greater portion of OBSI data collection is conducted on a pavement type not designated to be in the study, the entire Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway corridor. Since this is an asphalt freeway with a half-inch asphalt rubber surface, it does not represent a new concrete pavement joints every 15 feet with 1 inch of asphalt rubber. This appears to be included simply to bias the data. BTW, this section of freeway was recently measured to be 25 degrees hotter during the peak time of day than a diamond ground concrete pavement. ADOT should evaluate several of the sites that Volpe has proposed where they indicated the streams nearby do not affect the results, when in fact, these are concrete lined canals with back slopes which can reflect to the monitoring points. At least one location also appears to have overhead structures which could affect the results. Thank you for your time. End comment, and that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Melissa. So next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Items 3A through 3D are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the TPC have questions or would like a presentation on any of the items? Hearing none, could I have a motion to recommend approval of items 3A through 3D?
So moved. Bridget Peterson.
Slow.
I'll second the motion. Charles Humental.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Peterson and a second by Charles Humental. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, Melissa, please take the roll for the vote.
Thank you, Chair Harkey. Members of the TPC, I'll call your name. Please indicate how you vote on the motion. Be sure to unmute before responding. Rock Arnett.
Vote aye.
Thank you. Mayor Barney.
Aye.
Thank you. Dave Barry. Councilmember Binsbacher.
Aye.
Thank you. Jen Daniels.
Aye.
Thank you. Doug DeCluson.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Durham.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. Charles Humantle.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Lord.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Price. Mayor Orsborn.
Aye.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Aye.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers. Mayor Wires.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss. Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair Hartke, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Item number 4 is a draft regional transportation plan, Momentum 2050, and draft FY 2022 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. Our MAG Transportation staffer, Audra Kester-Thomas, will provide a report. I did have the chance to hang out with Ms. Thomas yesterday as she presented literally all things transportation across the state, far beyond the scope of MAG, to a group of realtors in Chandler, a packed room of the We Serve group. So Audrey, you did a good job, and we're look forward to hearing your presentation now.
Thank you very much, Chairman Harkey. It was great to be joined with you yesterday at a really well-attended event for the Southeast Valley. And greetings to the remainder of the Transportation Policy Committee today. Pleased to be with you to give you the latest activities associated with the development of our next regional transportation plan and a concurrent federally required document, our Transportation Improvement Program. Next slide. I'm going to review very quickly for the benefit of our audience, our performance-based planning approach and the work that you all did this summer. And we'll talk about the intersection of this planning work, focused really on the extension of Proposition 400, but how it intersects with our federal requirements for developing both a short and long-range plan, housed both in a regional transportation plan as well as the Transportation Improvement Program, and our federal requirement to ensure both are air quality conformant. And then we'll talk about our next steps. Next slide. So first, talking a little bit more about momentum. Next slide. As you all know, we've spent the last 18 months or so proceeding through our performance-based evaluation process. This is required both by federal and state statute. And then this summer, we're able to deliver a unanimously approved investment strategy supported by an extension of Proposition 400, the dedicated half-cent sales tax, first established in Maricopa County back in 1985. Next slide. So you know our focus really ramped up this spring with MAG's delivery of 4 different scenarios, 2 different philosophies, each at 2 different funding rates to be used by you as an information decision-making tool. Next slide. You gave us the direction at the end of May to start with that system optimization half-cent scenario, go back out and work with our member agencies to identify any remaining priorities that were missing out of that scenario, and then gave us the direction to develop a new revised scenario based on those priorities. Next slide. We came back delivering 2 different alternatives using the guidance you had provided, which was either expanding over a half-cent or extending the term. Next slide. And ultimately, the direction you gave at the end of June in a unanimous fashion that was ultimately concurred to unanimously by Regional Council was to proceed with a half-cent 25-year scenario. We came back, worked through July with you to finish off project phasing, a required element for our air quality conformity process. And ultimately, you recommended and Regional Council unanimously approved entrance into air quality conformity. Next slide. So taking a step back and re-reviewing what that investment strategy includes. Next slide. We focus largely on the available funding to this region. That includes a dedicated half-cent sales tax extended for 25 years, again, from the years 2026 to 2050, as well as funding available to the region, both our share of the Highway User Revenue Fund at a statewide level, but then also our federal funding for transit and highways that come by way of the region by formula. This makes available to the region for the years 2026 to 2050, approximately $36.7 billion. Next slide. The investment strategy includes a combination of projects, and we have a couple hundred different projects identified, but also programs. You're familiar with this map. This represents those high capacity projects, discrete projects identified within the plan. Next slide. But also, we don't want to lose sight of the important programmatic investments. This is in part one of those strategies MAG is employing to be more flexible. You've given us clear direction that things change, especially over a horizon year to the year 2050. And this programmatic approach is one of our strategies in being nimble, being able to respond to the latest and greatest changes throughout our region. Next slide. So while not often getting the top billing because it's not mappable, we don't want to lose sight of these important programmatic investments, in part because several of these really complement the strong public support we've seen and comments we've received over the course of our project horizon. Active transportation, those bicycle and pedestrian investments have seen significant public support and setting aside $1 billion for those sorts of investments, expanding the already established program here at MAG. Continuing your air quality investments and mitigation strategies, expanding our arterial investments to include not just expanding or modernizing our grid system, but also recognizing in some places a rehabilitation need. While we have a regionally branded, mostly locally funded transit system here in the region, we are able to expand contributions from a regional perspective to further fortify our super grid system in the region. Emerging technology is something we heard loud and strong from all of you. We need to be able to respond and be nimble to the future when new innovations or technologies emerge to ensure this is, in fact, a smart region. Continuation of established ITS and safety programs here at MAG, as well as establishing a regional transportation demand management strategy, not only ensuring that we can maximize the infrastructure investments we've already made, but also use strategies to address congestion or mitigation aspects associated with major construction projects, of course, similar to our Broadway Curve project ongoing today. Next slide. You can learn more on ourmomentumplan.com. We've updated the website to include this information. We'll continue to lean on our website as an information and education portal now and through next year. Next slide. But now I want to take a step back and talk about how this planning work that's been mostly our focus over the last 18 months intersects with our federal requirements to develop a long-range transportation plan. Next slide. A regional transportation plan per federal statute is intended to be a long-range vision of planned investments to ensure the efficient movement of people and goods throughout our region. It needs to have a horizon of at least 20 years, and it focuses on the large regional significant projects and programs funded through resources available to the region, specifically those coming by way of formula. Transportation Improvement Program is a short-range project list. Its horizon needs to be at least the first 4 years, include all regionally significant projects, regardless of funding source, and by definition, serves as the first four years of the regional transportation plan. At MAG and throughout other regions, we consider these products in tandem, serving shoulder to shoulder as our long-range planning guide. Both our regional transportation plan and transportation improvement program must be performance-based, be fiscally constrained, updated at least every 4 years, although by practice, MAG typically updates these every other year, and also reflects all funding sources and programs. And so this is really important. While our focus has largely been on the extension of Proposition 400 and a long-range vision for how we plan to invest regional resources, we now need to step back and pick up the remainder of regionally significant projects from today into the horizon year of 2050. That includes the final 4 years of our Proposition 400 program, certainly the proposed projects with our extension work and momentum, Pinel RTA projects within our planning area, and any wholly locally funded regionally significant projects. And of course, both of these documents and the projects and programs contained herein must be air quality conformant. Next slide. This is intended to demonstrate and show a bit of the overlap. I know it can be confusing, and since our focus largely has been on the year 2026 and beyond, wanted simply to pause here to demonstrate the difference in overlap of these policy documents relative to our notable funding programs. You'll see on the bottom the illustration of the TIP serving as those first 4 years of our regional transportation plan, as well as our RTP's horizon out to the year 2050. Next slide. Next steps include a focus on air quality conformity. Next slide. Today's presentation was to catch you all up on where we stand in terms of the final remaining stages of our air quality conformity process before we bring our regional transportation plan, transportation improvement program, and conformity analysis through in our November and December cycle for consideration and adoption. Next slide. We did release on Monday the beginning of our 30-day public comment phase for the RTP tip and conformity analysis. Drafts of those documents are available on MAG's website, and we will seek and document any public feedback obtained over the course of this 30-day period. Document that and bring that back through, as mentioned, starting in November when we come through at Management Committee and then Transportation Policy Committee before Thanksgiving. And then what we hope to be a celebratory event on December 1st to Regional Council for consideration of adoption of this seminal document. We would then work with our federal partners and expect a finding of air quality conformity sometime early in the new year. Next slide. As you all know, this is one of many milestones in this long planning process. For all intents and purposes, our focus now switches to enabling legislation, working with our legislative partners to enable Maricopa County to place an extension of the sales tax on a ballot next November 2022. We are currently working on enabling legislation, and those discussions continue. That will be our focus over the course of the next handful of months and into the new year when we work with our legislators partners to enable this county to continue this important investment, our record of success established back in 1985. Next slide. With that, Chairman Harkey, that completes my presentation. Simply want to acknowledge and extend our appreciation, especially for unanimous decisions this summer. On the heels of a clean audit that was just delivered of Proposition 400, we feel like, pun intended, a lot of momentum heading into our enabling legislation effort with our legislative partners. Eric and I stand ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Intended pun received. Are there any questions? Hearing none, this item is on the agenda for information and discussion only. Thank you, Audra. Item number 5 is the MAG Freeway Noise Analysis Study Update, Technical Memorandum number 2. MAG Transportation Staff John Bullen will begin this presentation. Mr. Bullen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC. Very happy to be here today with you to present an update on our freeway noise analysis. This is a follow-up to the presentation that we had given in June. Next slide, please. So today, just want to start, bring this committee up to speed on where things stand with the pilot program. And then from there, turn it over to Dr. Aaron Hastings with the United States Department of Transportation Volpe Center to give an update on the work they've done so far. And then we'll conclude with what to expect next with a specific focus on our next presentation to this committee in November. Next slide, please. So I will begin by giving an update on our current Diamond Grind pilot program. Next slide, please. As you all recall, back in 2020, we received regional council approval to initiate a pilot program whereby we modified the scopes of 3 projects funded through the region's freeway program, otherwise known as the Freeway Life Cycle Program, to replace the rubberized asphalt with a diamond grind. As part of that pilot, we're working hand in hand with our partners at the Arizona Department of Transportation to assess a number of different factors, including what the life cycle costs of each pavement type are, the quality of ride, as well as the public acceptance of a ground concrete surface. And really that's today's focus, with particular focus on the Price Freeway corridor. Next slide, please. So the map that you see on the screen represents the 3 approved Diamond Grind pilot program projects from the regional freeway program. As we're all familiar, the Price Freeway was actually the first project out the gate. So ADOT completed that widening, completed the Diamond Grind work back in 2020. As you are also aware, we've received a number of comments from the public, which have led to this noise study that we're undertaking now. The second project is on Loop 101, the Pima Freeway, between I-17 and Pima Road. That project is still in construction, though construction activities are mostly complete. A lot of the work currently now focuses on some of the interchanges and some of the work items off to the side. So a couple points I want to emphasize there. The Diamond Grind work on that corridor was actually completed back in early June. So June 4th was the final Diamond Grind work undertaken. In terms of public comment, so we've worked with our partners over at ADOT. There have only been 2 public comments received to this point on related to the Diamond Grind noise issue. This is fairly consistent with what ADOT would expect to see with any project, regardless of the surface treatment in terms of noise. So certainly we're not getting the same level of feedback that we've received down on the Price. We do anticipate that full construction activities will conclude later this year. And then the third project that's been approved under the Diamond Grind pilot program is on the Agua Fria. That project is in design. It's currently scheduled to go to construction in 2024, though that's a project that would be ready to go earlier should funding be available. Next slide, please. The other item I wanted to make this committee aware of are 2 pavement rehabilitation projects that are funded through the ADOT process. So these are projects outside of the regional freeway program, programmed through the state's process. So the first is a pavement rehabilitation project on I-10, essentially from 19th Avenue out to Avondale Boulevard with a gap where the South Mountain Freeway has come in. This project was originally scheduled to be rubberized asphalt. This summer, ADOT made an operational decision to switch that pavement type to diamond grind. So that's actually underway now. And then the second project I want to make you aware of is a pavement rehabilitation project on I-17 between Dunlap and Deer Valley Road. So ADOT has not determined what the pavement type will be. They anticipate that that decision will be needed made early next calendar year, sometime in the January timeframe, but we continue to track that one closely. Next slide, please. Moreover, I just want to emphasize, a couple of key issues about where we were at. We had shown this chart as part of the initial consideration for the Diamond Grind pilot program. As we've talked about, the existing rubberized asphalt that covers the system is old. More than 50% of that rubberized asphalt is beyond its useful 10-year life. As that rubberized asphalt ages, it begins to crack, it begins to pothole, and if conditions get bad enough, it actually creates a safety issue. So what we've actually seen, certainly within the last year, is that there's instances where ADOT actually has to go out and remove the layer of rubberized asphalt due to safety issues. So absent additional funding to repave those areas with rubberized asphalt, those are actually going to be left as bare concrete. There are a few sections, notably the Price Freeway between Baseline and the 202 Red Mountain, as well as sections of the Santan down in the Chandler area, that ADOT has actually used maintenance funding to go out and perform diamond grind, though maintenance funding is extremely limited, and we do not anticipate that ADOT would have the funds to do this elsewhere. Next slide, please. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to introduce our consultant from the U.S. DOT Volpe Center, Dr. Aaron Hastings, to give an update on where the freeway noise study is. Aaron?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the TPC. So what I would like to do is just start with a little bit of an overview of what the study is and what we've accomplished so far, and then go into where we're at right now. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So earlier this year, the freeway noise study was initiated to identify and analyze noise characteristics at levels present in residential areas near highways. The figure in this slide shows the corridors for this study that we're looking at. These have been selected in order to identify and analyze the noise characteristics of rubberized asphalt and diamond grind pavements, to look at the noise levels present and along the highways, as well as in residential areas near the highways. Two of these corridors are aged rubberized asphalt, State Route 51, Piestewa Freeway, and Loop 202, Santan Freeway. These have been selected in order to evaluate the characteristics of pavements that will soon need to be replaced. The other two corridors are Diamond Grind, Loop 101, Price Freeway, and Loop 101, Pima Freeway. These have been selected in order to quantify the expected change in characteristics as the aged rubberized asphalt is replaced with the diamond grind. In addition to these four sections, we are also looking at an additional section on Pima, as well as a fifth corridor, Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway, in order to collect some limited data on characteristics of newer rubberized asphalts. If we can go to the next slide, please. So you may remember from previous presentations, there's four main types of measurements that we'll be conducting in this study. There are wayside and residential measurements, and there are effective flow resistivity, or EFR, and onboard sound intensity, or OBSI measurements. The first two, wayside and residential measurements, these are intended to measure the acoustic or the sound environment at specific locations. And because of this, they include both the effects of the source as well as the effects of the path on that source. The wayside measurements are really designed to get a reference level, so they're more consistent with standard measurements, whereas the residential measurements are intended to get the sound environment in the actual residential locations. So they'll have different levels of influence from the path. The EFR measurements, those are intended to characterize one of the characteristics of pavements, how acoustically reflective they are. So a pavement that has a high EFR value is highly acoustically reflective, and an EFR that's very low has essentially a more absorptive characteristic. Both pavements will be on the high side, but we're looking to make sure that we have a good estimate of the specifics, because there is a range there. The onboard sound intensity measurements, these are the best measurements that can be done in order to actually understand the noise that is due to the tire pavement interface. So because this is a question of which pavements should be used or what are the effects of pavements, this is the measurement that's going to give you the quantification of that difference between the two pavements. The rest of these measurements are really showing how those are modified as you go over distance. This one is giving you the most precise answer on those. So all 4 of these measurements give us different answers to parts of the question for this study. If we can go to the next slide, please. So before we go into the current status, I do want to just kind of do an overview of the initial setup, the initial phase. Sorry, I'll stop saying So data collection for the study has been scheduled into 2 different phases. The first phase was to study what occurred between July 8th and July 10th of this year. During this time, we were really focusing on evaluating the traffic volumes and patterns and understanding what the acoustic characteristics were of potential sites. Because this is in July, these are considered off-peak volumes, but it helps us understand generally what we're going to be getting. In order to achieve the understanding of the different characteristics, basically what we did was we collected wayside measurements, so short-term wayside measurements, and we also noted the physical characteristics of the sites. If we can go to the next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So in addition to the traffic volumes and speeds, the characteristics of the site also will affect, especially the residential measurements. So some of the things that we were also looking at during the preliminary measurements were the ground effects, shielding, wind diffraction, the potential for temperature gradients, atmospheric absorption, and divergence. All of these will affect the propagation of sound. And what we wanted to do here was to really make sure that we're capturing something that's representative of the issue that we're looking at. So of the 4 methodologies that we're using, we're really concerned about making sure that the wayside and residential methods have good consistency between these characteristics for the different sites that we selected. And what we were focusing on was trying to make sure that these were representative with the environment that's surrounding Loop 101 Price Freeway, as this is where a lot of comments from the residents have occurred. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in a previous presentation, we did discuss the conducting of a traffic analysis to make sure that we were capturing measurements during peak days of the week and during peak hours of the day. In addition to this, it's also important to make sure that we have free-flowing traffic. So we also did additional analyses to look at the speed of the traffic over the course of the day. Basically, we want to make sure that the speeds are not dropping down, which you can get for when you have like too much congestion. And if the speeds drop to like 30 miles per hour consistently, that would be an issue. But we did a speed analysis, and the analysis that we're showing here is for the Price Freeway, but we also have analyses for the other corridors as well. And all of these were showing that for the most part, there aren't any real significant issues with speed drops at the points of peak volume. So that does indicate that those are going to be the best times to do the measurements in order to make sure we have the highest sound level generated by the sources. So that's just helping us confirm the times for the locations that we are looking at. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So at the end of the preliminary measurements, we ended up coming up with 10 candidate sites that consisted of 4 locations adjacent to diamond grind pavements and 4 locations adjacent to pavements overlaid with rubberized asphalt. In addition to these 8 sites, we also had 2 alternate locations that were also identified. The pavement adjacent to each of the selected sites varies in terms of age and condition, which we felt was very important because there are definitely effects as the pavement ages. by having this range of pavement ages and conditions, it allows us to basically do a comprehensive analysis of how the different characteristics impact the surrounding acoustic environment. So we're not just answering one question, but we're answering all the potential questions that would be coming up from this. If we can go to the next slide, please. So for the next few slides, we'll be talking about the measurements that are planned in September, which are currently ongoing. And so for this, we have the 4 types of measurements that we discussed. For the residential sites, we had 2 types of residential measurements during the September period. We have short-term attended measurements. These are more numerous in nature, but they are shorter in duration. So they're measurements of 15 to 30 minutes, but we can get more of these. We're also looking at long-term unattended measurements, which have a duration of a week. So with those, we can see more variation, and that will give us some more information that we'll talk about a little bit later. All the residents from which a complaint was received along the price corridor were included as potential sites for the short-term attended measurements. Sites within each of the clusters that you see here in the rightmost figure, the 3 blue circles, were selected for long-term measurements. And this is, again, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but this, by selecting these different locations, that's going to give us some ability to analyze some different or infer some results from the analysis as well. We can go to the next slide. So in addition to the residential tests, we are also conducting EFR tests. Again, this is to characterize the acoustic reflectivity. These measurements have been co-located with 4 of the 8 Wayside measurements. So for each of the Wayside measurements, we selected 4 of those, and we did EFR on those. We did fewer measurements of those because this is a somewhat lower priority compared to the Wayside, and we didn't want to expend too much resources for these. But this gives us a good update of previous EFR measurements so that we can speak to the current conditions of pavements around the area. If we go to the next slide, please. So we also selected 8 sites for the OBSI. These are all co-located with the Wayside measurements. So for each of the Wayside measurements, there is an OBSI measurement. In addition, we also did additional OBSI measurements along Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway corridor. We picked up 2 other locations along that section of roadway, which has some of the better conditioned rubberized DGAC or rubberized asphalt. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as part of the site selection process, preliminary measurements were taken, which we discussed a moment ago, and observations were made during that time to determine the suitability of each site. The measurements that were taken from the selected Wayside locations were for a duration of 10 minutes at the approximate locations that we were eventually going to do the September measurements. In addition to these measurements, the MAG staff and the VOLPI staff also observed the existing noise conditions at each of the locations, and we spoke with the residents, had conversations with them to gather additional information. Through these steps, we're able to confirm that each of the selected sites would be able to reinforce or understand the questions that were going on. While we were reviewing the preliminary measurements, we did note some differences between the frequency spectra of the rubberized asphalt and the diamond grind pavement, which was consistent with the initial assessments that ADOT had made as well. The measurements from the rubberized asphalt did have stronger low frequency content compared to the diamond grind when you adjusted for volume. And this difference in frequency could affect some of the perceptual characteristics that doesn't necessarily show up in an overall level. So this is something that we definitely want to be aware of as we are doing the analysis. So that basically means that we're not just looking at overall levels, we're also looking at the spectral content of the data. If we can go to the next slide, please. During the residential site scoping, further details were provided by a few of the residents that we were able to talk with. In certain areas, it was noted that the most severe noise impacts were not necessarily at the times where we know the sources are the highest, but occurred at other times, typically either in the early morning or at night. So this is consistent with what we've also seen in the logged complaints as well. And because of this, we did want to, well, for one, do the long-term measurements, but we also wanted to make sure that we picked long-term measurements that would allow us to evaluate the presence of some of the atmospheric effects, which is what would most likely cause those differences, cause those levels to be higher at nighttime. So those effects would be temperature inversions or temperature lapses, as well as wind speed gradients. So those initial, when we set up those corridors or those 3 blue circles, we picked locations that were going to be sensitive to one or another one of these characteristics, and that's going to allow us to infer which of these meteorological effects are potentially affecting how the sound is propagating. If we go to the next slide. So at this point, I'll give you basically the next steps or where we're at with the full measurement phase. This study is currently in the process of collecting the full data set. We started September 7th and we'll be finishing up September 19th, so this Friday. The plan and schedule for this phase has been updated as we've been going along to basically make sure we're addressing all of the observations and the anecdotal information that we've gotten during the preliminary measurements in 2021. July 2021. The Wayside, EFR, and OBSI measurements are capturing a range of pavement conditions, including new or newer segments of rubberized asphalt. And we're also looking at long-term measurements that are on opposite sides of the freeway. Sorry, did I not say to get to this one? I think we just moved to it. Sorry, we're talking about this one right now. So we're making sure that we have a wide range of pavements. We're also setting up those long-term measurement sites so that we can make those inferences about the atmospheric effects as well. The findings from the full measurement period will result in a final report that will be drafted and presented to the MAG Transportation Policy Committee in November 2021. And if we can go to the next slide. I just want to make a few final notes to kind of tie this all together. The tire pavement noise is largely affected by the pavement texture, the porosity, and the flexibility of the pavement. Pavements with smooth surfaces tend to be quieter than rough pavements because aggregate that is above the average. So you can think of, if people are looking at my image, you can see my hand here, that's your average pavement. If you have aggregate that's sticking out, that basically acts to poke at the tire. So those rougher characteristics will tend to increase the sound. They act like little hammers striking the tire. Porous materials, that is those with random pass through which the air can flow. So you can think of basically the rubberized asphalt is a more porous because you have little dips in it that allow the air to basically escape from the tire. It's much more technical than this, but this is giving you a basic idea of what we're talking about. Those porous materials can help to reduce the sound. Then also flexible pavements such as rubberized asphalt tend to be quieter than rigid pavements because they can help to soften those blows. Again, these are some simplifications of what's going on, but these are 3 important characteristics of the pavements. As the pavements age, new textures, features such as cracks, potholes, and exposed aggregate can increase the roughness of the pavement. You can have that porosity degraded by dust and other detritus that fills in some of those holes. And you can also have some of the pavements can become more rigid as the UV light kind of degrades the flexibility of them. So all of these things are important aspects of how the sound is going to be generated. So we wanted to make sure that we were measuring a wide range of pavement characteristics. So that's why we're doing this kind of extensive study, but we're focusing on gathering data in an area where we know that there's also issues. So between those two sets of data, we're expecting to be able to answer a lot of the questions that have been coming up. At this point, I think I would like to hand it back over to John and let him field any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Craig, if we can advance to the next slide, please. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, just want to emphasize a few points moving forward. So, as Dr. Hastings had noted, the team is out in the field doing the full data collection. They have actually been in town for the last week and a half or so. So it is a extremely robust effort. I think we will collect a wealth of information that will hopefully give some insight as to what those residents along the Price Freeway are hearing, and certainly what we can expect moving forward with different corridors. We do intend on coming back in November to present the findings of the noise analysis. This, of course, is just one component of the overall discussion as we look at the future of the region and, whether or not we want to continue with rubberized asphalt or continue to explore diamond grind. And so, following that November TPC presentation, we do anticipate that we will have further policy conversations early in 2022 about next steps. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, that concludes our presentation. We'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Committee questions.
I have some maybe comments instead of questions, if that's okay, Mayor Hartke. This is Jen Daniels.
Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. So I did ask that we have this agenda item presented because from an ADOT perspective, decisions are being made from a financial standpoint to diamond grind portions of our system outside of the pilot program in order to create a quieter pavement. And I make no comments about whether which treatment is quieter at this point. We'll wait for the results of the pilot study. But from a safety perspective and also from a conditions perspective, ADOT did make the determination to move forward with those two identified as John had the map up earlier, two additional sites outside of our pilot areas. I wanted to make sure that MAG Transportation Policy Committee had line of sight to that. I specifically because I'm wearing my state board hat as I participate here. I wanted to ensure that you all knew what was happening throughout the system, and I have been reassured both by Director Halikowski as well as Eric Anderson that in the event that from a policy level perspective, this body and the regional council determine that they want to move forward with something other than diamond grinding, the portions of our system that have been diamond ground up until this point could be resurfaced with rubberized asphalt, and that it would not affect the integrity of our current system. So I just wanted to make sure that that statement was included as part of this discussion today, and ensure that everyone had a line of sight, if you will, to what was happening outside of a MAG decision.
Thank you, Jen. Additional comments or questions?
Mayor, this is Charles Human. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Human.
Maybe better offline. I know we're going to see this in another month, but a lot of really technical data here, a very interesting process. At the end of the day, what I was expecting to find was a comparison between rubberized asphalt and the diamond grinding. And if the asphalt that we're looking at is not properly maintained, the degradation issue that the speaker spoke of seems to be what one of the earlier comments was, that this may not be apples and oranges. And it seems like you have to compare new diamond grinding to new rubberized asphalt. And maybe that's a question for today, and maybe it's a question for me to speak with staff offline about. But that's the area where I don't think I fully understand if we're looking at two comparable issues.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, if I may, so to sort of go back to, really, I think the conversations that we've had over the last year and a half, I think what we do know is that from, a noise perspective, new rubberized asphalt is the quietest pavement type. However, really the challenge with which we're dealing, directly relates to those activities that we just finished this summer, which is to say, we have the region which is constrained by the amount of available resources, and we have a lot of priorities that exceed those available resources. And so as this body, as the region weighs trade-offs, really the intent with the Diamond Grind pilot program was to explore if we could use a concrete-based surface treatment that, while initially might not have volumes quite as low as rubberized asphalt, but still attenuates freeway noise and does so at a much constant level across the duration of its useful life. So when you consider life cycle costs, Diamond Grind is significantly cheaper than rubberized asphalt. And so unfortunately, certainly with the state of the gas tax and, the need to modernize that, our region, the state, is left with inadequate resources to maintain. And so that's one of the big policy questions that we're wrestling with. And one of the factors why we're really focusing on more aged rubberized asphalt is that as we go through the system, as we replace these areas, it's not new rubberized asphalt that we're going to take off, it's the older rubberized asphalt. And we're trying to understand what members of the public would experience with that change. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Humenthal, I hope that addresses some of your questions.
I think it does. I think it really ends up being a quality versus cost issue, and that's something I'm anxious to see the next phase of the study to have further discussion on. Thank you for answering it.
Additional questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Reardon.
Please proceed.
A question for Mr. Hastings. It's similar to what Charles just discussed, but aside from the question of whether the asphalt has been maintained as it should, how do you account for, or do you account for the fact that you're comparing the old rubberized asphalt to the new Diamond Grind? In other words, you're comparing, rubberized asphalt at its worst, and exacerbated by possibly by not having been maintained. But the rubberized asphalt at its worst versus the Diamond Grind at its best. Do you account for that at all, or is there a way to account for that?
Thank you, Mr. Reardon and Mr. Chairman. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was told I was having some problems. I think we hopefully got that settled. Yeah, so I can add a little bit more to John's excellent response. So one of the things is we are collecting data for newer rubberized asphalt as well. So it's not brand new, but it is still in good condition. So that helps us look at. We're not going to just be lumping everything all together and doing a single analysis. We'll be looking at different conditions. So we can look at the older pavements that are getting replaced and compare those to the new Diamond Grind. We can also look at the newer rubberized asphalt and compare that to Diamond Grind. That's the best we can do right now with the condition of the highway system here. The other thing to consider, though, is most of the complaints have not been that the old rubberized asphalt is horrible and the new Diamond Grind is horrible. A lot of the complaints, or most of the complaints, have been it was okay before, and now with the Diamond Grind, it's much worse. So there's some kind of change that seems to have happened between the old rubberized asphalt and the new Diamond Grind, and that's really what we're trying to understand. So because that's really, I think, the primary question right now. Having those two types of pavement is the most important to look at, because obviously if we do a comparison of the newest rubberized asphalt, as John says, that's going to be the quietest pavement. but people did seem to be finding the older rubberized asphalt acceptable, and it was only when the diamond grind came in that people started to raise these complaints. So being able to compare those two is very important, I guess is what I would like to say.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Mayor Hartke, this is Doug DeClusen. Could I say something?
Please, sir.
Thank you. I kind of know the freeway system pretty well, and most of those areas, or a lot of those areas that you guys are testing, where it's quiet ride pavement, are 10 to 15 years old, which is way past the asphalt's lifespan, or what should have been its lifespan. At the most, it should have been 8 years, maybe 10. Once it gets past 10, it should have been taken off and replaced. So to compare the noise levels of something that's 5 years or 50% past its life cycle to brand new, diamond grind doesn't seem logical to me.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
Aaron, related to that, when you talk about new pavement, I assume you're talking about South Mountain, which is probably about 2 or 3 years, and then related to new diamond grind. Is that the comparison?
That would be the
when you
newest.
say
That
new?
would be the newest section of rubber. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee too, if I could, interject, having a little more familiarity with our freeway system than Aaron too. So we are taking measurements from South Mountain, which you can pretty much consider new rubberized asphalt. There is the section of the Pima Freeway as well, south of, I believe it's Via de Ventura. That asphalt is about 5 years old at this point in time. And so that gives us a pretty good indication of where we're at, midlife. But to my earlier statement, I really think the challenge is, from a regional policy consideration, is what is the avenue going forward? We've acknowledged that most of the rubberized asphalt is older than its useful 10-year life, but as we weigh the trade-offs, I think it's fair to say that if we do commit to rubberized asphalt, we will need to invest the right amount of money to replace that on a useful cycle. And so we're just focused on the noise issue now. When we consider the issue in full, we'll also take into consideration those life cycle costs, which is some of where that other element will come in.
Additional comments, questions?
Yeah, Mayor Hartke, it's Corey Woods from Tempe.
Please.
Great, thank you so much. I guess, Mr. Fuelmantle, I think really encapsulated it a lot better than I probably could, which is sort of talking about, it seems like we're talking about a difference between potentially quality versus cost. And while, I definitely understand the concern about making sure that we're spending money wisely and trying to find cost-effective solutions for the region. But at the same time, I just, I'm definitely interested as well in, as the study continues to progress, some of what comes back, because from what I was sort of gathering and kind of understanding this issue prior to this meeting, that maybe with the diamond grind and the rubberized asphalt, maybe in a 5 to 7 year time period, maybe everything somewhat equalizes. But the challenge, of course, then becomes, for the residents who are in the adjacent areas for those 5 to 7 years, while things begin to kind of equalize themselves, the problem is those residents are dealing with that from, that's from the moment a child is 11 years old to the point that they're 18 years old and a full-blown adult. And so I think that's sort of my concern, is just, trying to, while cost definitely is an issue. And I appreciate John's comments about saying that if, this group decides that we want to go with a rubberized asphalt solution as opposed to diamond grind, we're going to have to absolutely allocate enough money and put enough money away to make sure that we can properly maintain it and replace it. But my basic concern is just, trying to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're providing a high quality of life to the residents in all of our collective cities. And I do agree that if we choose to go with a more expensive solution because we think that's what adds to a higher quality of life, helps people to enhance their property values, then I think this group just needs to, make the determination. We're going to have to put more money aside to ensure that the asphalt is properly maintained. But obviously, as well, I'll continue to look forward to, kind of future reports out from the study. And I appreciate what MAG staff is doing and what Aaron's doing to bring us back some information about this. So I just appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions? Well, I had two comments, so I'm seeing no others. First of all, Dr. Harris, one of your slides, I think it was labeled propagation, identified itself as Price at Warner. You might want to relook at that. I think it's Price and Ray. The pedestrian crosswalk is a half mile south at Galveston. So just for future presentations to relook at that. And my second comment is actually a question. You had mentioned additional noise and questioned whether it was atmospheric related to mornings and evenings, and wondering what was going on. I know Mayor Woods and myself probably received a lot of those particular complaints, and I'm just curious, a question to you. Those are certainly the times that people would be most likely to notice noise, perhaps having a cup of coffee in their backyard or entertaining in their backyard in the evenings, so that they would be more likely to be out if they're not at work. But so you're looking at atmospheric solutions or possibilities, and so I'll be looking forward and just get your comment again on I'm a bit surprised that we would see I guess a micro change in the atmosphere that would result in sound. So I just addressed my question on that one, as opposed to more likely to be noticing noise as opposed to atmospheric conditions on that one slide.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great question. So definitely we understand from physics that atmospheric conditions can affect how sound propagates. There's anecdotal stories, if you go back, I think it's World War I or World War II, where people could hear cannons being fired in Europe and England, depending on the weather changes. So it can have a very significant effect. As far as whether that is happening or not, the way we're going to understand that is by looking at the long-term measurements that we're doing. So we have 6 sites that are specifically set up to measure the sound over the course of 7 days. And for those, and I think another thing just to mention, I don't remember if I said it in the actual presentation, but we are collecting volume and speed data throughout this entire period. So we will be looking at that in addition to the sound levels. So we will understand if we see a situation where the noise levels are going up, but the volume is either the same or is going down, which is what I would expect in the nighttime conditions, then we will be able to make inferences from that say, yes, it is probably some type of atmospheric effect or meteorological effect. And based off of the way we have the measurements, the long-term measurements set up on different sides of the corridor, that should allow us to make some inferences about whether it's wind effects or whether it's temperature effects that are causing that. Now, it is a very complicated phenomenon, and so we won't have a predictive model of that, but we will be able to answer the question, is it just because people are outside and they're observing it at that time, or is it because there is something changing with the way the sound propagates? We'll be able to answer that question with the data that we're collecting. I hope that answers your question?
It does. I just found that interesting as a true volume change as opposed to a true observer change.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any additional questions or comments? All right. This is also for information and discussion. And thank you, Dr. Harris. Item number 6 is wrong way detection project update. Again, Mr. Bullen will introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC. Next slide, please. So pleased to be introducing this item today and to give everybody a little background about why this topic is being discussed. So at the last regional council meeting back in September, there was actually additional information requested about ADOT's wrong way detection efforts. This resulted from a project scope change request that was taken through the MAG process. Just to give a little bit more background, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation. For those of you that weren't at MAG at the time, back in June of 2017, the MAG Regional Council actually approved funding to initiate a wrong-way detection pilot on I-17, stretching between I-10 and Loop 101. There was further expansion that was actually identified of the detection element of that pilot as part of the systems management and operations plan. And so what you've really seen since then is that either through funding streams sort of guided by the systems management and operation plan, as well as through projects funded through the regional freeway program, such as the Loop 101 Price Freeway Corridor, ADOT has installed additional wrong-way detection. So we are joined today, next slide please, by Ms. Susan Anderson, ADOT Assistant State Engineer, who will give a little bit more detail on the project. So Ms. Anderson.
Hey, thank you, John, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Susan Anderson with the Arizona Department of Transportation, and thank you very much for inviting me to present today on ADOT's wrong-way detection program. As you're all aware, wrong-way crashes are a nationwide problem, and Arizona is not exempt from that. Prior to deploying the pilot project, ADOT had actually reviewed crash data over an 11-year timeframe between 2004 and 2014. And we found that there had been 245 crashes due to wrong-way crashes. And of those, 25% of them were fatal. This is a much higher fatality rate than the overall fatality of 1% of all crashes. Sadly, 91 people had lost their lives during this 11-year timeframe due to wrong-way crashes. And this really spurred our effort to pursue strategies for mitigating our wrong-way crashes. Next slide. This slide presents a little bit more current crash data regarding crashes and fatalities statewide, as well as with wrong-way crashes. Some points to note: most wrong-way crashes in Arizona occur within the Phoenix area. Wrong-way crashes are more severe and result in much higher fatality rates. They do, however, result in about 2% of our statewide traffic fatalities. So they're a small percentage, but they're very severe. 65% of those have involved impaired drivers, and many other crashes are suspected of being confusion by the driver, either due to their age or to medication that they're taking. Next slide, please. Next slide. ADOT's vehicle detection pilot project was deployed on I-17 between I-10 and Loop 101. It's a 15-mile freeway segment within the Phoenix urban area that has historically experienced a high number of wrong-way crashes. The pilot project served as a proof of concept, and it was the first in the system to actually be able to track wrong-way vehicles. The system went into operation in 2018 and has been operational ever since. ADOT, of course, is very grateful to our regional partners at AZmag for funding this effort. The pilot did include detection coverage of 42 ramps, 34 mainline segments, along with the development of a decision support system. Next slide, please. The wrong-way detection pilot project uses several components that I'd like to discuss here with this slide. ADOT's system uses a number of time-proven components that are readily available within our transportation industry. The system is unique because it actually assembles those components in a new and innovative configuration. Most notably, the project uses FLIR thermal cameras that detect the wrong-way vehicles. Thermal cameras are located along the freeway mainline and at the interchanges at the intersection of the exit ramp and our cross-arterial streets. These thermal cameras will detect vehicles as they enter the exit ramp. When a vehicle is detected, a lighted wrong-way sign will activate. These are internally illuminated wrong-way signs that are located about halfway down the exit ramp. These are used to notify the wrong-way driver that they are indeed traveling in the wrong direction. Now, when a vehicle is detected by the system, a decision support system notifies the dispatchers at our traffic operations center. The dispatchers will then review a short 10-second video that is taken by the thermal camera of that event and then be able to verify that it truly is a wrong-way vehicle. Upon verification, the decision support system is used to then complete several additional tasks all simultaneously. CCTV cameras along the freeway automatically turn and pan to the location of where the wrong-way vehicle entered. And traffic operators are then able to track the vehicle's location and share this information with law enforcement. Messages are posted on the dynamic message signs upstream of the location to notify right-way drivers that there is a wrong-way vehicle ahead and they are advised to exit the freeway. Also, upon verification, the ramp meters upstream entry ramps are activated to a red state. This is in an attempt to restrict additional cars from entering the freeway. The decision support system is used to notify our law enforcement partners so they may proceed with intercepting and apprehending the wrong-way drivers. Now, this system has been successful due to our high level of coordinated efforts that occur between the dispatchers at the Traffic Operations Center as well as law enforcement. And ADOT has the benefit of having a DPS trooper located at our Traffic Operations Center 24/7. Next slide, please. And here I'd like to present kind of a summary of our wrong-way crashes before and after deployment of the I-17 detection system in 2018. You'll note that there really has not been a significant change in the number of crashes, yet with the detection system, ADOT is now able to detect the number of events that occur within the pilot segment. Detection has really been a key finding out of our program and key to informing law enforcement. Next slide, please. Data from the pilot project is indicating that there are more frequent occurrences of wrong-way crashes, wrong-way events occurring on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And most of those events actually happen at night. We've got 85% occurring at night and only 15% during the day. The graph on the right is displaying the increase in events detected in 2018. Overall, the detection system itself detected 54 wrong-way events. However, if ADOT had relied only on 911 calls, only 15 of those events would have been recorded. This is a significant improvement with the detection system that we're able to actually know when wrong-way events occur. Next slide, please. The major findings out of our pilot project we have noted it has been quite successful and is operating as it was designed. The system itself provides increased detection with our thermal cameras at the interchanges. Traditionally, wrong-way vehicles were reported by 911 calls, and yet these thermal cameras are able to detect, we've noted, up to about 3 times as many of events. The improved notification to law enforcement as well is a huge improvement from this project we've noted. We're able to immediately detect and notify our law enforcement. When it comes to safety, of course, every second counts, and our enforcement partners have appreciated our ability to quickly and accurately relay information. Finally, we have seen a high number of self-correcting vehicles. During the 2-year pilot project, ADOT's wrong-way system detected 109 wrong-way events, and of these, 88% of the wrong-way drivers self-corrected on the exit ramps and did not enter the mainline freeway. Next slide, please. Now, the detection system is not the only countermeasure that ADOT has been implementing. Around the valley, you will notice that the wrong-way signs and do not enter signs are being upgraded to an oversized version. These are also being placed at a lower level on the posts in an attempt to capture attention of impaired drivers as they're driving the wrong way. You'll also notice that we're adding enhanced pavement marking. Most notably, you'll see directional arrows on the ramps and red raised pavement markers along the HOV lanes. ADOT is also doing what they can for educating the public through awareness campaigns, the ADOT app, and updating our traffic school material. Next slide, please. ADOT is continuing to roll out our wrong-way mitigation measures, focusing on the locations of the highest number of wrong-way driver occurrences. We're aligning our efforts, of course, where funding is available. The wrong-way detection systems are being included in many of our current and future ADOT projects. The map here is showing the green dots are locations where the thermal cameras have been located throughout the Phoenix Valley. In all, there are currently 256 detection sites. Next slide, please. This graphic is showing just a concept of the installation of thermal cameras that will be placed on dynamic message signs, and these will be used for mainline detection. This is planned for the Loop 101 corridor. Next slide, please. ADOT is continuing to monitor wrong-way events. Dashboards like this are being developed for each corridor to report performance metrics. This information is presented and reviewed with our management on a monthly basis. So we're keeping an eye on things. Next slide, please. And of course, as additional locations are brought onto the network, there is an increase on our operations and maintenance to the system. ADOT has recently developed an operations plan to standardize our work for monitoring and reporting our wrong-way data. And a training program has been recently developed for staff, and staff members are going through that program. Next slide, please. One of the most often questions we get, of course, is why doesn't ADOT work on a method to actually stop wrong-way drivers? I wanted to let everyone here know that our research center is studying this right now. They have a project underway that is identifying various devices for stopping wrong-way vehicles. This is really just identifying what methods are currently out there or in development. A number of developers are creating systems that are like barrier systems. Others are looking at disabling systems that will be used as an attempt to stop wrong-way vehicles. Please note, however, that ADOT does not want to introduce an unsafe device onto our system. So what we are finding right now is most of these prevention devices are currently in a concept or a very early design stage and have not yet been thoroughly tested. We're sure, though, that as technology continues to evolve, there will be more innovations in the future, and we look forward to that. Next slide, please. To conclude, just like to let you know, ADOT is very dedicated to mitigating wrong-way events by implementing the countermeasures that we have on hand. ADOT's pilot project has been effective test of our corridor level system, and we've been able to implement many wrong-way driving countermeasures. As a result, ADOT is continuing to deploy additional wrong-way detection throughout the state as a means of gaining increased safety and operational benefits. Next slide, please. With that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present. If you're interested in learning more, I advise everyone to please check our project report on ADOT's website. And of course, my contact and a few others are located here if you have questions later. With that, I will turn it back over to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TBC. I think either myself or Susan would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, John and Susan. Any questions? All right, hearing none, good presentation. This also was only for information and discussion. Next item is number 7. We have no legislative update today, so we're going to move on to number 8. Are there any requests by membership for an item on a future agenda? Hearing none. Item 9, are there any comments or announcements from the membership? All right, thank you, staff. Thank you, committee. Hearing none, our business is now concluded and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you at the next. Take care.